The black van waited in the shadows of Windsor Castle's private courtyard, its engine humming quietly in the early morning mist. Inside the ancient stone walls that had housed British royalty for nearly 1,000 years, a conversation was taking place that would change the monarchy forever. Prince William, heir to the throne, stood facing his uncle with documents in his hand and determination in his eyes. The papers contained evidence that could no longer be ignored, secrets that threatened to destroy everything the royal family had worked to rebuild. This was not a gentle family discussion over tea and biscuits in the palace drawing room. This was the moment when the future King of England would make the most difficult decision of his life, ordering his own uncle into exile. The van outside wasn't waiting to take Prince Andrew to another royal engagement or charity event. It was there to remove him from the heart of the monarchy, possibly forever. What had driven William to this desperate measure? How had Prince Andrew, once the Queen's favorite son and a war hero, become such a dangerous liability that his own nephew felt compelled to act? The story that unfolded over the next few hours would reveal family betrayals, international scandals, and the ruthless decisions required to protect the crown. As Andrew looked out the window at the waiting vehicle, he knew his privileged life as a working royal was over. But he had no idea that this was just the beginning of a much larger plan that William had been carefully crafting for months. The young prince had learned from his father's mistakes and his grandmother's regrets. He would not allow sentiment or family loyalty to threaten the institution he was destined to inherit. The clock was ticking, photographers were gathering outside the palace gates, and the world was about to witness something unprecedented in modern royal history. A prince being cast out by his own family, not in some medieval power struggle, but in the full glare of 21st century media scrutiny. The morning started like any other at Windsor Castle, with staff moving quietly through the corridors, preparing for another day in the life of Britain's most famous family. But Prince William had barely slept. He had spent most of the night in his private study, reviewing documents that his security team had placed before him just 48 hours earlier. The papers contained information that made his stomach turn and his hands shake with anger. His uncle Andrew had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. William paced the length of his office, his footsteps echoing on the ancient wooden floors. Through the tall windows, he could see the perfectly manicured gardens where he had played as a child, where his mother Diana had once chased him and Harry through the rose bushes. Those innocent days seemed like a lifetime ago now. Today, he would have to make a decision that would have made his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, proud and heartbroken at the same time. The intelligence report lay open on his mahogany desk. Photographs, bank statements, encrypted messages, and witness testimonies painted a picture of Prince Andrew that went far beyond the scandals that had already damaged the royal family's reputation. This wasn't just about questionable associations or poor judgment anymore. This was about activities that could potentially bring down the entire monarchy if they became public knowledge. Catherine had tried to talk to him earlier that morning, sensing his distress. But William couldn't share this burden with his wife, not yet. The fewer people who knew about the contents of that folder, the safer everyone would be. He had learned from watching his father navigate crisis after crisis that sometimes a future king must act alone, even when it breaks his heart. The door to his study opened quietly, and his private secretary entered with a solemn expression. "Sir, everything is arranged as you requested. The vehicle is waiting in the east courtyard, away from the main entrance. The driver is one of our most trusted people, and the route has been carefully planned to avoid any media attention." William nodded, straightening his tie and trying to compose himself. He had inherited his grandmother's sense of duty and his mother's compassion, but today would require him to suppress both emotions in favor of cold, calculated action. The monarchy was bigger than any one person, even family members who had once been war heroes and beloved uncles. "Has Prince Andrew been informed that I want to see him?" William asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. "Yes, sir. He believes it's about the upcoming charity event for veterans. He seemed quite pleased to be asked for his input, actually." The secretary's tone carried a note of sadness. Everyone in the palace who knew the truth understood what was about to happen. William walked to the window and looked down at the courtyard where the black van waited like a hearse at a funeral. In a way, that's exactly what this was, the death of Prince Andrew's role in the royal family, and possibly the death of any remaining innocence William had about the people he loved. His phone buzzed with a text message from his father, King Charles. "I know today is difficult. You're doing the right thing for the country and the crown. Your grandmother would be proud." William felt a brief moment of comfort knowing he had his father's support, even if Charles couldn't be directly involved in what was about to happen. The weight of history pressed down on William's shoulders. He thought about all the kings and queens who had walked these same halls, who had been forced to make impossible decisions to protect the throne. Henry VIII had executed 2 wives. Elizabeth I had ordered the death of her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots. Victoria had navigated family scandals that threatened to topple the monarchy. Now, it was his turn to prove he could put duty before family. Andrew's footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, growing closer. William could hear his uncle's cheerful whistling, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse around him. The prince was probably thinking about lunch plans or his next golf game, blissfully ignorant of the storm that had been gathering around him for months. William opened the folder one more time, steeling himself by looking at the evidence that had made this drastic action necessary. Bank transfers to offshore accounts, photographs from private islands, encrypted communications that revealed activities no member of the royal family should ever engage in. The intelligence services had been tracking these activities for over a year, building an airtight case while desperately hoping they wouldn't need to use it. But Andrew had gotten sloppy, or perhaps arrogant. He had stopped being careful about covering his tracks, believing that his royal status would protect him from consequences. He had forgotten the hard lesson that his ex-wife Sarah had learned years earlier. The royal family's protection only extends as far as their usefulness to the crown. The knock on the door came exactly at the appointed time. Prince Andrew entered with a broad smile, dressed in his favorite navy blazer with the regimental tie he was so proud of wearing. He looked every inch the distinguished royal, the war hero who had served his country with honor in the Falklands. For a moment, William felt a pang of genuine grief for the uncle he had admired as a child. "William, my boy," Andrew said warmly, settling into the leather chair across from the desk. "I have some wonderful ideas for the Veterans Charity event. I've been thinking we could invite some of my old Navy colleagues, really make it a special occasion." William watched his uncle's face, searching for any sign that Andrew suspected what was coming. But there was nothing, just genuine enthusiasm for what he thought was a family meeting about royal duties. It made what William had to do even more painful, but also more necessary. "Uncle Andrew," William began, his voice carefully controlled, "I'm afraid we need to discuss something much more serious than charity events." Andrew's expression shifted slightly, the smile fading as he picked up on the formal tone. "Oh, well, certainly. What's on your mind?" William reached for the folder and placed it on the desk between them. "I've received some information that concerns your activities over the past several years. Information that puts the entire royal family at risk." Andrew's eyes flicked to the folder, and for just a moment, William saw a flash of fear cross his uncle's face. It was quickly replaced by his usual bravado, but it was too late. William had seen the recognition, the guilty knowledge that his worst nightmare was finally coming true. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," Andrew said, but his voice had lost its confident tone. "What kind of information?" Instead of answering immediately, William opened the folder and spread some of the photographs across the desk. Bank statements showing mysterious transfers, images from security cameras, transcripts of conversations that should never have taken place. Andrew's face went pale as he recognized each piece of evidence. "The intelligence services have been building this file for 14 months, William said quietly. "They brought it to me because they know that if this information becomes public through normal channels, it will destroy not just you, but the entire monarchy. They're giving us a chance to handle this internally as a family matter." Andrew's hands were trembling now as he picked up one of the photographs. "This isn't what it looks like," he started, but his voice was weak and unconvincing. "Then explain to me what it is," William said, leaning forward. Explain the money transfers. Explain the meetings. Explain why British intelligence has photographs of you engaging in activities that could be considered treasonous. The word hung in the air between them like a sword. Treason. It was a word that had sent royal family members to the Tower of London in centuries past, a word that carried the weight of ultimate betrayal. Andrew slumped in his chair, the fight going out of him as he realized there was no escape from the evidence spread before him. It started so innocently, he whispered. Just business connections, networking opportunities. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, William replied firmly. And now we have to deal with the consequences. What are you going to do? Andrew asked, and for the first time since entering the room, he sounded genuinely afraid. William stood and walked to the window, looking down at the waiting van. You have two choices, Uncle Andrew. You can leave quietly with me right now, and we'll handle this as a family matter. Or you can refuse, and I'll have to turn this folder over to the authorities and let them deal with you publicly. The silence in the room was deafening. Outside, life at Windsor Castle continued as normal, but inside this study, the future of the British monarchy was being decided by a conversation between uncle and nephew, two men who had once shared happy family memories but were now separated by duty and betrayal. Andrew looked at the photographs one more time, then at his nephew's determined face. He could see Elizabeth in William's eyes, the same steely resolve that had carried the Queen through decades of challenges and scandals. There would be no negotiation, no royal pardons, no special treatment. If I come with you now, Andrew said slowly, what happens to me? William turned back from the window, his expression softening slightly. You disappear, Uncle Andrew. Quietly, completely, permanently. It's the only way to protect the family and the crown. The choice was no choice at all, and both men knew it. Andrew nodded slowly, understanding that his life as a British royal was over. Whatever came next would be exile, obscurity, and the constant knowledge that his actions had nearly brought down the institution his family had served for generations. Very well, Andrew said, standing with as much dignity as he could muster. Lead the way. The walk through the castle corridors felt eternal. William led the way, his footsteps measured and deliberate, while Andrew followed behind like a man walking to his own execution. The servants they passed looked away respectfully, but William caught the knowing glances between them. Word traveled fast in royal households, even when no one spoke openly about what was happening. As they approached the side exit that led to the east courtyard, William's phone vibrated with an encrypted message from his security chief, media activity increasing at main gates. Tabloid photographers spotted with telephoto lenses. Alternative route confirmed clear. The timing couldn't have been more critical. Somehow, whispers had begun to circulate in London's media circles that something significant was happening at Windsor Castle. William suspected that Andrew's associates had noticed his absence from scheduled meetings and were starting to ask questions. The window for a quiet resolution was closing rapidly. William, Andrew said softly as they paused before the final door, I need you to know that I never intended to betray the family. Everything I did was supposed to help British interests. William stopped and turned to face his uncle. In the dim lighting of the narrow corridor, Andrew looked older than his years, the weight of his choices finally visible on his face. Uncle Andrew, helping British interests doesn't require secret bank accounts in the Cayman Islands or midnight meetings with foreign intelligence operatives. Andrew's shoulders sagged. You don't understand the complexity of international business relationships. Sometimes you have to operate in gray areas to achieve larger goals. Gray areas? William's voice carried an edge of anger that he had been suppressing all morning. Is that what you call selling access to royal family members? Is that what you call sharing sensitive information about palace security procedures? Is that what you call photographing confidential documents in your private study? Each accusation hit Andrew like a physical blow. He had known this confrontation was inevitable from the moment he first saw those bank statements in William's folder. For months, he had convinced himself that his activities were justified, that he was serving his country in unconventional ways. But hearing his nephew list his betrayals so starkly made him realize how far he had fallen. The money wasn't for personal gain, Andrew protested weakly. It was meant to fund legitimate business ventures that would benefit Britain's economic interests. William shook his head. Uncle Andrew, please don't insult my intelligence. We know about the yacht in Monaco. We know about the property purchases in Switzerland. We know about the gambling debts that started this whole mess. The mention of gambling debts made Andrew's face flush with shame. That was the true beginning of his downfall. Losses at private casinos that had spiraled out of control, debts to people who didn't accept royal status as collateral. When traditional lenders wouldn't help a prince who had no steady income beyond his royal allowance, he had turned to other sources of financing. Those sources had been patient at first, understanding that a member of the royal family needed time to arrange payment. But patience had eventually turned to pressure, and pressure had turned to demands for services that went far beyond simple repayment. Information about palace routines, details about royal family movements, introductions to other wealthy and powerful individuals who might be interested in similar arrangements. How long have you known? Andrew asked as they reached the door to the courtyard. The intelligence services briefed me 6 weeks ago, William replied. But I've suspected something was wrong for much longer. Your behavior at family gatherings, the way you avoided certain topics of conversation, the expensive gifts you couldn't explain. Catherine noticed it too. She said you seemed nervous around her, like you were hiding something important. Andrew felt a stab of regret at the mention of Catherine. The Duchess of Cambridge had always been kind to him, treating him like a beloved uncle despite his sometimes difficult personality. The thought that she had noticed his guilty behavior made him feel even more ashamed of what he had done to the family that had accepted him despite all his flaws. William opened the door and stepped into the courtyard. The black van waited exactly where it had been positioned, its driver standing beside it in a plain dark suit that marked him as palace security rather than a chauffeur. The morning mist had cleared, revealing a crisp winter day that would have been perfect for a pleasant drive through the countryside under different circumstances. Sir, the driver said quietly to William, all preparations are complete. The route will take approximately 3 hours, and the destination is fully secure and prepared. Andrew looked at the van with a mixture of curiosity and dread. Where exactly are we going? William was quiet for a long moment, weighing how much information he should share. A secure location where you can remain safely while we determine the best long-term solution. Somewhere with no media access, no internet connectivity, and no opportunity to contact your former associates. The implications of that description were clear. This wasn't just temporary removal from royal duties. This was complete isolation from everything and everyone Andrew had known for years. His phone would be taken away, his access to email and social media would be cut off, and his ability to communicate with the outside world would be entirely controlled by palace security. For how long? Andrew asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. That depends entirely on how quickly we can resolve the security implications of your actions, William replied diplomatically. In reality, both men understood that Andrew's exile might be permanent. The intelligence services had made it clear that his associates were still active threats to British security, and as long as those threats existed, Andrew could never safely return to public life. The van's rear door opened, revealing a comfortable interior that looked more like a luxury car than a prison transport. There were leather seats, climate control, and even a small refrigerator stocked with beverages. William had insisted that his uncle be treated with as much dignity as possible, even in these circumstances. I'll need to collect some personal items for my rooms, Andrew said, looking back toward the castle. William shook his head. Everything you'll need has already been prepared and loaded. Staff packed your belongings early this morning while you were at breakfast. Andrew felt another wave of realization about how thoroughly this operation had been planned. While he had been eating his usual morning meal in the small dining room, completely unaware of the crisis unfolding around him, palace staff had been efficiently packing his life in his suitcases under William's direction. My medals, Andrew said suddenly, panic creeping into his voice. My military decorations from the Falklands. Did they remember to pack those? William's expression softened slightly. Those medals represented the one period of Andrew's life when he had been an unquestionable hero, when his service to his country had been clear and honorable. Yes, Uncle Andrew, your medals are with your belongings. As Andrew climbed into the van, he took one last look at Windsor Castle, the place where he had grown up, where he had played as a child with his siblings, where he had brought his own daughters to visit their grandmother. The ancient stones had witnessed nearly 1,000 years of royal history, births and deaths, celebrations and crises, triumphs and tragedies. Now, they were witnessing his departure, possibly forever. William climbed into the van beside his uncle, settling into the seat across from him. He had decided that morning that he couldn't simply order Andrew away without accompanying him on at least part of the journey. Despite everything, despite the betrayals and the security risks and the potential damage to the monarchy, Andrew was still his uncle, still family. The van's doors closed with a solid thunk that seemed to echo with finality. The driver took his position behind the wheel and started the engine, its quiet hum filling the otherwise silent interior. Through the tinted windows, Andrew watched the familiar buildings of Windsor Castle slide past as they left the courtyard and headed toward the main road. "William," Andrew said as they passed through the castle's outer gates, "I want you to know that I'm proud of you. You're going to be a good king someday, better than I ever could have been." William looked at his uncle, searching his face for any sign of manipulation or false sentiment. But Andrew's expression was sincere, perhaps the most honest emotion he had shown in months. "Thank you, Uncle Andrew. That means something to me, even now." The van merged onto the public road, leaving the royal grounds behind. Andrew pressed his face to the window, watching the familiar countryside roll past. He had driven these roads countless times over the years, usually heading to social events or business meetings or family gatherings. This time, he had no idea when or if he would see them again. His phone, which had been buzzing intermittently with messages and calls all morning, suddenly went silent. Andrew pulled it from his pocket to discover that the signal had been completely blocked. The technological leash that had connected him to his old life had been quietly severed. "The communications blackout is for your own protection as much as ours," William explained, noticing his uncle's confusion. "Your former associates will be looking for you when you fail to appear at scheduled meetings. The less they can track your movements, the safer everyone will be." Andrew nodded, understanding the logic even as he felt the full weight of his isolation settling over him. No phone calls, no text messages, no emails, no way to reach out to anyone in the network of contacts he had built over years of royal duties and private business dealings. "What will you tell the media?" Andrew asked, "when they notice I'm missing from public events?" William had been preparing for this question since the operation began. Medical leave, initially, a private health matter that requires extended treatment away from public scrutiny. The palace has used similar explanations in the past when family members needed to step back temporarily. But both men knew this wouldn't be temporary. The intelligence file in William's study contained enough evidence to keep Andrew in exile for the rest of his life, assuming he wanted to avoid criminal prosecution. The choice between permanent exile and a very public trial for treason was no choice at all. As the van continued its journey through the English countryside, Andrew found himself thinking about his daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie. They would be told eventually, of course, but for now they would simply be informed that their father was taking an extended leave from royal duties for health reasons. Protecting them from the full truth of his actions was one of the few mercies William could offer. The landscape outside began to change as they left the familiar territory around Windsor and headed toward more remote areas of the country. Rolling hills gave way to wilder terrain, and the comfortable manor houses and tidy villages were replaced by isolated farms and dense woodlands. Andrew realized he had no idea where they were going, and perhaps that was intentional. The less he knew about his destination, the less information he could potentially share if his former associates ever found a way to reach him. As if reading his thoughts, William spoke quietly. "The location has been carefully chosen for maximum security and minimum contact with the outside world. You'll be comfortable but completely isolated from your former activities. The van began to slow, and Andrew could see they were approaching some kind of checkpoint, a modest gatehouse with security barriers and uniformed guards. This was clearly not an ordinary country estate or hotel. This was a facility specifically designed to hold people who needed to disappear from public view. As they passed through the security checkpoint, Andrew caught a glimpse of the name on a small, discreet sign, Ashford House Residential Facility. It meant nothing to him, but the serious expressions on the guards' faces and the sophisticated security equipment visible at the entrance told him everything he needed to know about his new circumstances. Ashford House rose before them like something from a Gothic novel. A sprawling Victorian mansion set in the middle of what appeared to be hundreds of acres of private grounds. High stone walls topped with discreet security equipment surrounded the property, and Andrew counted at least 6 different guard posts positioned strategically around the perimeter. This was no ordinary country retreat. The van wound its way up a long gravel drive lined with ancient oak trees, their bare winter branches creating a canopy that filtered the afternoon sunlight into dancing shadows across the road. Despite the circumstances, Andrew had to admit the location was beautiful in its isolation. If he had to disappear from the world, there were certainly worse places to do it. "How long has this place existed?" Andrew asked as they approached the main building. "Ashford House has been in government use since the 1960s, William replied carefully. "It's officially listed as a private research facility, but it serves various purposes for people who need to step away from public life for security reasons." Andrew understood the euphemistic language. This was where inconvenient people were sent to disappear. Not criminals, exactly, but individuals whose continued presence in normal society posed risks that couldn't be managed through conventional means. Politicians caught in scandals too sensitive for public exposure, business leaders with dangerous knowledge, and now, apparently, wayward members of the royal family. The van came to a stop in front of the mansion's main entrance, where several people waited to receive them. Andrew recognized the professional bearing of security personnel, but also noticed what appeared to be medical staff and someone who looked like a senior administrator. This was clearly a well-organized operation that had been prepared specifically for his arrival. As they climbed out of the van, Andrew was struck by the complete silence of the place. No traffic noise, no aircraft overhead, no sounds of nearby civilization. Just the whisper of wind through the trees and the soft crunch of gravel under their feet. The isolation was already beginning to feel oppressive. "Prince Andrew," said the woman who appeared to be in charge, stepping forward with a respectful but businesslike manner. "I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the facility director. We've prepared everything for your stay and want to ensure your comfort while you're with us." Andrew noticed she didn't mention anything about the length of his stay or the conditions under which he might leave. Her carefully neutral tone suggested she had experience managing other high-profile residents who had arrived under similarly sensitive circumstances. William pulled Dr. Mitchell aside for a quiet conversation, while Andrew was left standing with the security staff. He couldn't hear the specific words, but he caught enough fragments to understand they were discussing security protocols, communication restrictions, and medical monitoring procedures. It was surreal to hear his nephew calmly arranging for his indefinite imprisonment, even if it was being presented as protective custody. "Your belongings have already been placed in your suite," Dr. Mitchell said when she returned to Andrew's side. "We've tried to make the accommodation as comfortable as possible given the security requirements." She led them through the mansion's front door into an impressive entrance hall that retained much of its Victorian grandeur. Crystal chandeliers hung from ornate ceiling moldings, and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors gazed down from the walls. If Andrew hadn't known better, he might have thought he was visiting a wealthy friend's country estate for a weekend shooting party. But the illusion was broken by the discreet security cameras positioned at every corner and the electronic card readers beside each doorway. This was clearly a facility designed to monitor and control every movement of its residents. "How many other people are staying here?" Andrew asked as they climbed a grand staircase toward the upper floors. "That information is confidential," Dr. Mitchell replied politely but firmly. Each resident's privacy is strictly protected. You may encounter others during common activities, but we ask that you respect their anonymity as they will respect yours. Andrew wondered what kind of people he might meet in the coming days and weeks. Former government officials caught in spy scandals, business leaders who had crossed dangerous international criminals, military officers who had stumbled into classified operations they couldn't talk about. The possibilities were both intriguing and deeply unsettling. They reached the second floor and walked down a long corridor lined with portraits of British monarchs through the centuries. Andrew found it grimly appropriate that his journey into exile was being witnessed by painted images of his ancestors, kings and queens who had faced their own crises and scandals, though probably none quite like this. "This will be your suite," Dr. Mitchell said, opening a door with her electronic card key. "We've tried to include amenities that will make your stay more pleasant." The accommodation was indeed impressive. A large sitting room with comfortable furniture and a fireplace, a separate bedroom with a king-size bed, and a private bathroom that would have been at home in a luxury hotel. French doors opened onto a private balcony that offered views over the estate's extensive grounds. But Andrew immediately noticed the details that marked this as a high-security environment. The windows were made of reinforced glass that couldn't be broken from the inside. The balcony was enclosed with decorative metalwork that was actually a sophisticated security barrier. And the French doors, while they opened for fresh air, were equipped with sensors that would trigger alarms if he tried to climb over the balcony railing. His belongings had been unpacked and arranged exactly as they might have been in his rooms at Windsor Castle. His clothes hung in the wardrobe, his personal items were placed on the dressing table, and his military medals were displayed in a place of honor on the mantelpiece. Someone had taken great care to make this feel like home, even though everyone knew it was actually a prison. "Your daily routine will be quite flexible," Dr. Mitchell explained. "Meals are served in the main dining room, though you can request room service if you prefer privacy. There's an excellent library, a fitness facility, and extensive grounds for walking. We also have medical staff available around the clock for any health concerns." William had been quiet during the tour, but now he spoke up. "Uncle Andrew, I need to return to London this evening. Is there anything specific you'd like me to arrange for you?" Andrew looked around the beautiful suite that would be his home for an indefinite period. "I like writing materials," he said finally. "Good paper, proper pens. If I'm going to be here for a while, I might want to write down some of my memories." William nodded, though both men understood the implications. Any writing Andrew produced would be carefully monitored and censored before being allowed to leave the facility. His memoirs, if he chose to write them, would never see publication unless they were approved by the same intelligence services that had orchestrated his exile. "I'll make sure you have everything you need," William promised. "And Andrew, I want you to know that this isn't permanent punishment. If the security situation changes, if we can find a way to resolve the outstanding issues, we'll reconsider your circumstances." But even as he said the words, William knew they were probably false comfort. The intelligence file back in his study contained evidence of activities that couldn't be undone or forgiven. Andrew's associates were still active, still dangerous, and still likely to view him as either a valuable asset or a dangerous liability. Neither status would allow him to safely return to public life. Dr. Mitchell excused herself to handle administrative matters, leaving the uncle and nephew alone for their final private conversation. The weight of everything that had happened, and everything that wouldn't happen, settled over them both. "Will you tell Beatrice and Eugenie the truth eventually?" Andrew asked, looking out the window at the peaceful countryside that would be his view for months or possibly years to come. "When it's safe to do so," William replied. "When we're certain that your former associates can't use them to try to reach you. Right now, the less they know about your actual circumstances, the safer they'll be." Andrew nodded, understanding that his exile would extend beyond just his physical removal from royal duties. His relationships with his daughters, his friends, his entire social network would have to be severed to protect both him and them from the consequences of his actions. "I know you probably can't tell me," Andrew said, "but are others involved?" "Other members of the family who might have been compromised by my associations. William's expression darkened. That's still being investigated. The intelligence services are working to understand the full scope of the security breach. Anyone who may have been affected will be briefed and protected appropriately. The implication was clear. Andrew's activities had potentially put other royal family members at risk. People who had no idea their private information or schedules might have been shared with foreign intelligence services. The guilt of that possibility was almost worse than the shame of his own exile. A soft knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Dr. Mitchell returned with two staff members who were clearly there to begin the process of transitioning Andrew to his new reality. "I'm afraid visiting time needs to end now," she said diplomatically. "Prince William, your security detail is ready to escort you back to London whenever you're prepared to leave." The moment William had been dreading all day had finally arrived. He would have to leave his uncle in this place and return to Windsor Castle, where he would need to explain Andrew's sudden absence to other family members who didn't know the full truth. "Uncle Andrew," William said, extending his hand in a formal gesture that somehow seemed appropriate to the gravity of the moment. "I hope you understand that I did what I believed was necessary to protect the family and the country." Andrew took his nephew's hand and held it for a long moment. "You did what a good king would do, William. You put duty before personal feelings. I'm sorry that my actions forced you into this position." William felt tears threatening for the first time that day, but he controlled himself. Kings don't cry. His grandmother had always told him, at least not in public. And even though this wasn't technically public, he was being watched by staff who would report on his behavior. "Take care of yourself, Uncle Andrew. And remember, this situation isn't necessarily permanent." But as William left the suite and walked back down the corridor lined with portraits of monarchs, he knew he had probably just said goodbye to his uncle forever. The intelligence services had made it clear that Andrew's associates were sophisticated and patient adversaries who wouldn't simply forget about their investment in a royal family insider. As long as those people remained active threats to British security, Prince Andrew would remain in exile at Ashford House, cut off from everything and everyone he had known. It was a living death of sorts, but it was the only alternative to an actual death sentence for treason. The van was waiting in the circular drive when William emerged from the mansion. As he climbed into the back seat for the journey back to London, he took one last look at the imposing Victorian building where his uncle would spend his remaining years. Through one of the second-floor windows, he could see a figure standing on the balcony. Andrew, watching his nephew's departure and probably contemplating his new reality. The distance was too great to make out facial expressions, but William imagined he could see the weight of regret and acceptance in his uncle's posture. As the van pulled away from Ashford House and headed back toward the main road, William began mentally preparing for the next phase of the crisis. He would need to brief his father on Andrew's successful relocation. He would need to coordinate with the intelligence services on the ongoing investigation into Andrew's associates. And he would need to prepare public explanations for Andrew's absence from upcoming royal events. The hardest part, though, would be facing Catherine that evening and finding a way to explain why he looked like a man who had just attended a funeral. How do you tell the woman you love that you've just condemned your own uncle to a life of exile to protect the crown you'll someday wear? The English countryside rolled past the van's windows as they drove back toward London, the same peaceful landscapes that Andrew was now seeing from his balcony at Ashford House. But while William would return to his duties and his family and his preparations for kingship, Andrew would remain behind, watching those same hills and fields change with the seasons while the world forgot he had ever existed. It was a fate worse than death in many ways, to be alive but completely erased from the life you had known, to retain all your memories and experiences but be unable to share them with anyone, to spend your remaining years knowing that your own family had been forced to choose between loyalty to you and loyalty to the crown. As the van merged onto the motorway that would take them back to London, William closed his eyes and tried to prepare himself for the weight of the secret he would now carry for the rest of his life. 6 months later, The world had accepted the official story of Prince Andrew's medical leave with the same polite indifference it showed toward most royal health matters. The palace press office had skillfully managed the narrative, releasing just enough information to satisfy media curiosity while revealing nothing of substance. Andrew was receiving treatment for stress-related health issues at a private facility, they explained, and required complete privacy for his recovery. William stood in his study at Windsor Castle, looking at a new intelligence report that confirmed his worst fears about the scope of Andrew's betrayals. The investigation had uncovered a network of foreign operatives who had been systematically gathering information about the royal family's private lives, security procedures, and government connections. Andrew had been just one source among many, but his royal access had made him particularly valuable to hostile intelligence services. The report contained photographs of Andrew's former associates conducting surveillance on other members of the royal family. Catherine had been followed on her private shopping trips. The children's school routines had been mapped in detail. Even King Charles's medical appointments had been monitored and reported to foreign handlers who were building detailed profiles of the entire royal household. Reading these violations of his family's privacy, William felt a cold anger that went beyond anything he had experienced during Andrew's initial confrontation. His uncle hadn't just betrayed his country. He had sold his family's most intimate secrets to people who wanted to use that information for dangerous purposes. His secure phone rang, displaying the number for Dr. Mitchell at Ashford House. These monthly calls had become routine, brief updates on Andrew's adjustment to his new circumstances and his physical and mental health status. "Good afternoon, Dr. Mitchell," William answered. "How is our patient this month?" "Prince Andrew continues to adapt well to his circumstances," came the professional reply. "He's established a daily routine that includes extensive reading, some writing, and regular walks around grounds. His physical health remains excellent, though he does show signs of depression that we're monitoring carefully." William wasn't surprised by the depression diagnosis. 6 months of complete isolation from everyone he had known, with no prospect of release, would challenge anyone's mental health. But it was still difficult to hear that his uncle was suffering, even though that suffering was the consequence of his own actions. "Has he asked about his daughters recently?" William inquired. "Daily," Dr. Mitchell replied. "He's requested permission to write letters to them, but as per your instructions, we've explained that any contact with family members could compromise their safety and his security." This was perhaps the cruelest aspect of Andrew's exile, the complete severance from his children. Beatrice and Eugenie continued to believe their father was recovering from a stress-related illness at a private clinic. They had been told he needed complete isolation to focus on his health, and they accepted this explanation because they trusted the family's concern for his well-being. "Has he attempted any unauthorized communications?" William asked, though he already knew the answer. Ashford House's security systems would have detected and prevented any such attempts. "No, sir. Prince Andrew seems to understand the seriousness of his situation and the importance of maintaining communication discipline. He's been cooperative with all facility rules and procedures." William wondered if Andrew's cooperation came from genuine understanding or simply from despair. After 6 months of confinement, even the most defiant personality might surrender to the reality that escape was impossible and cooperation was the only way to maintain some dignity. "Dr. Mitchell, I need to ask you about long-term planning. What is your professional assessment of Prince Andrew's ability to adapt to indefinite residence at your facility?" There was a pause before the reply, and William could hear the careful consideration in the doctor's voice. "Prince Andrew is physically and mentally capable of maintaining his current lifestyle indefinitely. He's found ways to occupy his time meaningfully, and he's developing social relationships with other long-term residents. From a medical standpoint, he could continue at Ashford House for many years without significant deterioration in his condition." The clinical language couldn't disguise what Dr. Mitchell was really saying. Andrew was settling into a life sentence. He was making the psychological adjustments necessary to survive permanent exile, accepting his circumstances as irreversible and finding small pleasures and purposes within the constraints of his confinement. Thank you for the update, Dr. Mitchell. Please continue the monthly reports. William ended the call and walked to the window that overlooked the same courtyard where Andrew had climbed into the van 6 months earlier. The winter landscape had given way to spring and then summer, and now autumn was painting the castle grounds in brilliant colors that Andrew would never see again from these familiar windows. The door to William's study opened, and Catherine entered carrying 2 cups of tea and wearing the concerned expression she had adopted whenever the subject of Andrew came up. She had never been told the full truth about her brother-in-law's disappearance, but she was intuitive enough to understand that the official medical story didn't explain William's ongoing distress about the situation. "The monthly call from Andrew's doctors?" she asked, settling into the chair across from William's desk. "Yes," William replied, accepting the tea gratefully. "He's doing as well as can be expected under the circumstances." Catherine studied her husband's face, noting the tension around his eyes that always appeared when he discussed Andrew's condition. "William, I know there are things about Andrew's situation that you can't share with me, but I'm worried about how this is affecting you. You look like you're carrying some terrible burden." William felt the familiar weight of the secret knowledge that separated him from even his closest confidant. Catherine had been his partner through every challenge of royal life, but this crisis required him to protect her from information that could put her in danger. The intelligence services had been clear. The fewer people who knew the truth about Andrew's exile, the safer everyone would be. "I'm fine, Catherine. It's just difficult to see a family member struggle with health issues, especially when there's nothing we can do to help beyond providing the best possible care." Catherine didn't press further, but William could see she wasn't satisfied with his explanation. Their marriage had been built on honesty and shared burdens, but now he was asking her to accept exclusion from something that was clearly causing him significant pain. The secure phone rang again, this time displaying a number William recognized as belonging to the head of MI5. These calls were less frequent, but usually contained information that required immediate royal family consultation. "Your Royal Highness," came the crisp voice of Director General Helen Thompson. "I'm calling with an update on the ongoing investigation into Prince Andrew's former associates." William gestured for Catherine to remain in her chair, though he knew the conversation would be conducted in language vague enough to protect classified information even if she overheard. "What's the current status?" William asked. "We've successfully disrupted the primary network that was utilizing information from your family members' contacts. However, we've identified secondary connections that remain active and potentially dangerous. The individual in question continues to be a person of interest to hostile intelligence services." William understood the implications immediately. Even 6 months after Andrew's removal from circulation, his former handlers were still trying to locate and re-establish contact with him. They viewed their investment in a royal family insider as too valuable to simply write off, and they were actively searching for ways to reach him. "What measures are being taken to address these ongoing threats?" William inquired. "Enhanced security protocols remain in effect for all family members. The facility housing our mutual concern has been upgraded with additional monitoring capabilities, and we're continuing to track and neutralize the remaining network elements." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Director Thompson providing updates on surveillance operations, security assessments, and international intelligence cooperation efforts. When William finally ended the call, he realized that Andrew's exile was no longer just a family crisis. It had become a permanent feature of British national security operations. Catherine had listened to William's side of the conversation with growing concern. While she couldn't understand the specific details, it was clear that Andrew's medical leave was connected to serious security matters that required ongoing intelligence service involvement. "William," she said quietly, "is Andrew ever coming home?" The simple question cut through all the euphemistic language and diplomatic deceptions that had surrounded Andrew's disappearance. Catherine deserved an honest answer, even if it couldn't be a complete one. "No," William replied, meeting his wife's eyes directly. "Andrew will never be returning to royal duties or public life. His condition is permanent and irreversible." Catherine absorbed this confirmation of what she had suspected for months. Are Beatrice and Eugenie going to be told the truth eventually? When it's safe to do so, they'll be informed that their father's situation is more serious than initially explained. But the full truth that may need to remain classified indefinitely. William watched his wife process the implications of what he was saying. The daughters would eventually learn that their father wasn't recovering from a simple stress-related illness, but they might never be told the complete story of his betrayals and exile. They would have to live with partial truths and unanswered questions, just as Catherine was doing now. "I wish I could help you carry this burden," Catherine said, reaching across the desk to take William's hand. "Whatever Andrew did, whatever decision you had to make about him, I can see how much it's weighing on you." William squeezed his wife's hand, grateful for her support even though she couldn't fully understand the situation. "Someday, when the security concerns are resolved, I'll be able to explain everything. Until then, I need you to trust that the decisions being made are necessary to protect the family and the country." As evening approached, William found himself thinking about his uncle's daily routine at Ashford House. According to Dr. Mitchell's reports, Andrew had dinner each evening in the facility's main dining room with other long-term residents. He had developed friendships with people whose own secrets had led them to similar exile. They played chess, discussed books from the extensive library, and found small pleasures in their constrained circumstances. It was a civilized form of imprisonment, but imprisonment nonetheless. Andrew would never again attend a royal wedding or family Christmas celebration. He would never walk his daughters down the aisle or meet his future grandchildren. He would never see the places he had visited as a working royal or reconnect with friends from his military service. The intelligence report on William's desk contained photographs of Andrew taken by long-range surveillance cameras at Ashford House. He looked older than his years, but seemed physically healthy. In one image, he was sitting on a bench in the estate's garden, reading a book and apparently enjoying the sunshine. In another, he was walking along a path with two other residents, engaged in animated conversation. The photos suggested that Andrew was finding ways to make peace with his circumstances, creating a new life within the boundaries of his exile. But they also reinforced the finality of his situation. These gardens and corridors and common rooms would be his entire world for whatever years remained to him. William's phone buzzed with a text message from his private secretary. "Reminder. Official announcement tomorrow regarding Prince Andrew's extended medical leave and indefinite suspension of royal duties. Draft statement ready for your review." The public narrative was being formalized. After 6 months of vague explanations about temporary health issues, the palace would officially acknowledge that Andrew's condition required him to step back from royal duties permanently. It was another step in the careful process of erasing him from public life, while maintaining the fiction that this was a medical rather than security matter. As William reviewed the draft announcement, he was struck by how completely it would sever Andrew's connection to the role that had defined his adult life. No more military patronages, no more charity presidencies, no more ceremonial duties representing the crown. His name would gradually disappear from official royal family documentation, and within a few years, many people would probably forget he had ever been a working royal at all. The autumn sunset was painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple as William finished his review of the palace statement. Somewhere in the countryside, Andrew was watching the same sunset from his balcony at Ashford House, perhaps thinking about the family he would never see again and the life he had lost through his own choices. The weight of the day's revelations about ongoing security threats made William realize that his uncle's exile might be even more permanent than he had originally hoped. The intelligence services weren't just managing a historical scandal. They were dealing with active, ongoing attempts by hostile forces to reconnect with their former royal asset. As long as those attempts continued, Andrew would remain valuable as both a potential source of information and a symbol of successful intelligence penetration of the British royal family. His captivity at Ashford House wasn't just punishment for past betrayals. It was ongoing protection against future exploitation. William closed the intelligence files and locked them in his secure cabinet, then sat quietly in his study as darkness fell over Windsor Castle. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and decisions, more intelligence briefings and security assessments, continued management of a crisis that might never truly be resolved. But tonight he allowed himself a few minutes to grieve for the uncle he had known before the betrayals. The war hero who had once been a source of family pride. The man who had made terrible choices that destroyed not just his own life, but threatened everyone he claimed to love. The weight of the crown, William realized, wasn't just about ceremony and tradition and constitutional responsibility. It was about making decisions that broke your heart in service of something larger than personal feelings. It was about choosing duty over family, country over sentiment, the future over the past. His grandmother Elizabeth had carried similar burdens throughout her long reign, making choices that preserved the monarchy even when they caused personal pain. Now, it was his turn to prove he could do the same, to demonstrate that he understood the price of leadership and was willing to pay it when necessary. Outside his study window, the lights of Windsor Castle twinkled in the darkness, just as they had for centuries through wars and scandals, celebrations, and tragedies. The ancient stones would witness many more royal crises in the decades to come, and future heirs would face their own impossible choices between love and duty. But, for now, Prince Andrew remained safely contained in his exile. The monarchy's reputation was protected, and the country's security had been preserved. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was the ending that duty demanded. And in a world where kings and queens must sometimes choose between their hearts and their crowns, duty always wins.